Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
The mind is a battlefield. Every day a silent war is waged between the limitations imposed by fear and the boundless potential of ambition. Most people live in the trenches of small thinking, prisoners of self-imposed walls, convinced that the safest route is the smallest one. They mistake caution for wisdom, comfort for security, and realism for intelligence. But those who understand the magic of thinking big see the battlefield differently. They know that fear is an illusion, that limitation is a choice, that greatness is not reserved for the few, but for the bold. The size of your thoughts determines the size of your life. The bigger you think, the more space you create for possibility, for expansion, for transformation. The mind will always be a cage or a catapult depending on how far you dare to let it stretch. Thinking big is not about arrogance. It is not about delusion. It is about seeing beyond what is visible, believing beyond what is proven, and striving beyond what is expected. It is about refusing to let the smallness of past experiences dictate the vastness of future possibilities. A mind trained to think big does not shrink in the face of obstacles. It doesn't look at failure as a stopping point, but as a checkpoint. It does not see limitations as barriers, but as challenges to be transcended. Every great leader, innovator, and game changer throughout history first dared to see what others could not. They dreamed in dimensions too large for the doubters to comprehend, and they moved toward those dreams with an unshakable belief that the impossible was just an opinion. The real danger is not in aiming too high and failing. It is in aiming too low and succeeding. Success at a small level is seductive because it convinces you that you are winning when, in reality, you are just playing a game that is beneath you. It is easy to feel accomplished when you set goals that require little risk, little courage, little effort. But small victories do not lead to great legacies. They lead to a life of mediocrity, a life that feels full in the moment but empty in hindsight. The people who build empires, who redefine industries, who leave their mark on the world, are not those who settle for small wins. They are the ones who dared to think beyond what was necessary and reach for what was extraordinary. Thinking big is an act of rebellion. It is a direct challenge to the voices, both internal and external, that insist on playing it safe. Society conditions people to think small because small thinking is predictable, manageable, controllable. The moment you start thinking big, you become a threat. You disrupt the order, you shake the foundation, you introduce a level of unpredictability that the world is not prepared for. But those who dare to think beyond the ordinary refuse to be shaped by expectations. They understand that the only limits that exist are the ones they accept. They refuse to be tamed by convention, choosing instead to operate on the edges of possibility where the bold thrive and the fearful fade. The magic of thinking big is that it changes how you see yourself. When you allow your mind to expand, your self-image expands with it. You no longer see yourself as someone merely surviving, but as someone capable of achieving. You stop identifying with past failures and start identifying with future victories. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you move through the world shifts when you know you are capable of more. Thinking big does not just open doors. It makes you realize that half the doors you thought were locked were only waiting for you to push them open. Those who think small believe that big opportunities are given. Those who think big understand that big opportunities are created. They do not wait for luck, for permission, for perfect conditions. They act. They take steps before they feel ready. They build momentum where others hesitate. The greatest businesses, the greatest inventions, the greatest revolutions were not started by people who had everything figured out from the beginning. They were started by people who saw something greater and decided to chase it despite the uncertainty, despite the odds, despite the risk. The world belongs to those who move while others are still waiting for a sign. Doubt is the assassin of big thinking. It creeps in quietly, disguised as logic, as practicality, as realism. It tells you that aiming high is dangerous, that dreaming big is reckless, that it is better to settle than to suffer. But doubt is a liar. The real risk is not in aiming too high and missing. It is in aiming too low and never knowing what you are truly capable of. Fear convinces you that failure is the worst possible outcome, but those who think big know the truth. Stagnation is the real failure. A life spent avoiding risk is a life spent avoiding growth. The greatest danger is not in losing, it is in never playing the game at all. Thinking big forces you to expand beyond your current capabilities. It pushes you into discomfort, into learning, into transformation. It forces you to develop skills, to refine strategies, to become the kind of person who can handle the level of success you aspire to. People who think small want to be ready before they begin. People who think big begin so that they can become ready. They understand that growth is not something you wait for. It is something you chase. And the faster you chase it, the faster it catches up to you. The world is shaped by those who refuse to accept its limits. It is changed by those who reject the idea that things must remain as they are. Those who think big do not see reality as fixed, but as moldable. They understand that every great achievement once seemed impossible until someone did it. They know that the world's greatest breakthroughs were born not from certainty, but from audacity. The comfort zone is a prison for those who refuse to challenge their thinking. The biggest dreams belong to those who are willing to step beyond what is familiar and step into the unknown with the kind of conviction that bends reality in their favor. The mind does not see the world as it is. It sees the world as you believe it to be. Every perception, every decision, every opportunity you recognize is shaped by the internal framework you carry. This is not mysticism. This is biology. The brain is a filter, sorting through endless streams of information, choosing what to highlight and what to ignore. If you believe the world is filled with limitations, your brain will prove you right. It will find every roadblock, magnify every challenge, and reinforce every doubt. But if you expand your vision, if you allow yourself to believe that more is possible, your mind will begin seeking pathways instead of dead ends. It will highlight opportunities, magnify solutions, and guide you toward outcomes that were invisible to you before. Think about when you decide to buy a new car. Suddenly, you start seeing that model everywhere. It was always there, but your brain had no reason to notice it before. The same principle applies to success. When you train your mind to focus on possibility, you begin seeing what was always there, but previously hidden by your own limitations. The brain does not question your beliefs, it follows them. The larger your vision, the more your subconscious mind works to align reality with it. The world does not change, but your ability to navigate it does. Doors that seemed locked suddenly appear open. Connections that seemed unreachable begin forming. The bigger you think, the more your mind becomes a tool for achievement, rather than an obstacle to it. Belief is not just optimism. It is a command to your subconscious. It tells your brain what to prioritize, what to focus on, what to chase. When you set small goals, your brain seeks small solutions. It operates within the limits you give it, refusing to search beyond what you have deemed possible. But when you allow yourself to dream on a massive scale, your brain expands its search radius. It begins piecing together ideas, recognizing patterns, making connections that were previously unseen. You become more resourceful, more creative, more determined, not because the world changed, but because your perception of it did. The difference between those who achieve and those who don't is often not talent, intelligence, or luck. It is vision. Doubt is the most effective way to shrink your reality. When you doubt what is possible, your brain will seek proof that supports that doubt. It will highlight obstacles instead of pathways, risks instead of rewards, limitations instead of possibilities. This is why small thinking is so dangerous. It is self-reinforcing. The smaller your vision, the less your mind looks for, and the less it finds. It becomes a cycle, a feedback loop, where your own beliefs trap you in an environment of limitation. But the moment you decide to think bigger, you break that loop. You override the program that has been running on restriction and replace it with one of expansion. Opportunity is not given, it is seen. Two people can walk into the same room, face the same circumstances, and experience completely different realities. One sees problems, the other sees solutions. One sees barriers, the other sees challenges waiting to be conquered. The difference is mindset. The person who believes in bigger possibilities is scanning for them. Their brain is actively searching for ways to turn obstacles into stepping stones. This is not luck, it is focus. It is the ability to train your mind to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary, to extract potential from places others overlook. This is why thinking big is not just an advantage, it is a necessity. The world does not hand out greatness to those who are waiting to be convinced of their worth. It rewards those who have already decided they are capable. The people who achieve the impossible are not waiting for permission to think bigger. They already have. They have trained their minds to see beyond what is in front of them, to recognize opportunities that do not yet exist, to create doors where others see only walls. And because they believe it, their brain works relentlessly to make it real. The difference between a life of limitation and a life of expansion is how you program your mind. The thoughts you repeat become instructions. If you tell yourself something is too difficult, too risky, too out of reach, your mind will obey. It will stop searching, stop pushing, stop believing. But if you tell yourself that solutions exist, that pathways can be built, that there is always a way forward, your brain will rise to meet that challenge. It will find angles you had not considered, resources you had overlooked, strategies that others have dismissed. It will work for you rather than against you. The most powerful shift you can make is realizing that the world is full of opportunities, but you will only see the ones you believe are possible. This is why those who think big often achieve more. Not because they are better, but because they are looking for more. They are scanning the landscape with different eyes, filtering reality through a different lens. They do not see failure as an end point, but as part of the equation. They do not see obstacles as proof of limitation, but as invitations to expand their capacity. Their thoughts shape their world, and in doing so, their world begins to shape itself around them. There's no magic formula, no secret shortcut. The greatest tool you will ever have is the mind you train. Train it to seek limitations, and it will find them. Train it to seek possibilities, and it will create them. This is the law of vision. The reality you experience is the one your mind is searching for. And the best part? You are in control. You get to decide what you believe is possible. You get to choose the parameters you set. The only question is, will you let your mind shrink to fit the world? Or will you expand it to redefine what the world can be? Fear is the great architect of small thinking. It designs the walls that keep you contained, the ceilings that limit your potential, the locked doors that convince you opportunity is beyond your reach. The more you allow fear to dictate your decisions, the smaller your world becomes. But when you begin to think bigger, when you train your mind to operate in the realm of possibility instead of limitation, fear loses its grip. It becomes a background noise rather than a commanding voice. The mind, once conditioned to seek out risk and avoid uncertainty, begins instead to search for solutions. It no longer asks, "What if I fail?" It asks, "What if I succeed?" This is the shift that separates those who expand from those who remain confined. Thinking big is not about recklessness. It is about refusing to let fear be the deciding factor in your life. The more you expand your vision, the more your threshold for risk increases. You stop seeing obstacles as reasons to retreat and start seeing them as invitations to grow. This mental shift does not happen overnight. It is forged through repetition, through exposure, through the consistent decision to choose expansion over contraction. Every time you override fear with possibility, you rewire your brain. You teach yourself that discomfort is not a sign to stop. It is a signal that you are stepping into new territory, that you are stretching beyond your previous limitations. Those who think small do so because they have conditioned themselves to equate uncertainty with danger. They wait for guarantees before they act, for certainty before they commit. But the world does not operate on guarantees. The greatest rewards exist in the space where certainty is absent. Those who think big have trained themselves to move forward, even when the outcome is unknown. They understand that growth does not come from waiting. It comes from acting, from testing, from stepping into the unknown and learning as they go. The difference is not that they are fearless, but that they have made fear irrelevant. They have conditioned their default mental state to expect possibility, to see opportunity, to assume expansion rather than restriction. There is a direct correlation between the size of your thinking and the size of your courage. The more you expose yourself to big ideas, to ambitious goals, to visions that require you to stretch, the more your tolerance for fear diminishes. What once seemed impossible becomes merely challenging. What once felt overwhelming becomes an exciting puzzle. The mind adapts to what it is consistently fed. If you train it with limitations, it will become a master of excuses. If you train it with expansion, it will become a master of solutions. The mind is always learning. It is simply a question of what you are teaching it. Fear thrives in small environments. It grows in rooms where ceilings are low, where expectations are modest, where risks are avoided. But when you throw open the doors, when you expand the possibilities, fear has less room to maneuver. It loses its power because the space is too large for it to dominate. When you think big, you create an environment where fear becomes a spectator rather than a participant. It may still whisper in the background, but its voice is drowned out by the sound of momentum, of movement, of forward motion. Those who have mastered this shift do not eliminate fear, they outgrow it. This shift in thinking transforms not only your decisions, but your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is at the mercy of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who shapes them. You begin to operate from a position of agency, of power, of control. The world no longer feels like a series of roadblocks. It feels like a landscape of possibilities waiting to be explored. You stop hesitating because hesitation is the language of small thinking. Instead, you move with conviction, knowing that even if you do not have all the answers, you have the capacity to figure them out. Identity is not fixed. It is not a name you were given, a role you play, a definition set in stone. It is fluid, adaptable, and ever-evolving. Yet most people live as if who they are today is all they will ever be. They cling to an outdated version of themselves, holding on to limitations as if they were sacred truths. But the secret to transformation is simple. You must force your identity to stretch. You must deliberately expand beyond who you were yesterday. Push past the edges of your comfort and step into the version of yourself that exists beyond fear, doubt, and self-imposed limits. Thinking big is not just about what you want. It is about who you must become to achieve it. Growth is painful because it requires the destruction of the familiar. To stretch your identity, you must be willing to break old habits, dismantle outdated beliefs, and challenge the narratives that have kept you small. Most people resist this process because it feels like losing themselves. But in reality, they are not losing anything. They are shedding the parts that no longer serve them, shedding the excuses, the fears, the doubts. The more you let go of who you were, the more space you create for who you are becoming. You cannot think big while holding on to a small self-image. You must expand, evolve, and stretch beyond the limits of your past. The most uncomfortable moments in life are the ones that force you to redefine yourself. The moments when you step into unknown territory, take on challenges beyond your skill set, or commit to goals that seem beyond your reach. This discomfort is not a sign that you are in the wrong place. It is proof that you are in the right one. Growth is uncomfortable because it stretches you beyond your current capacity. It forces you to develop new skills, to sharpen your thinking, to elevate your resilience. Every challenge you face is an invitation to expand your identity, to step further into the person you are capable of becoming. People who refuse to stretch their identity live in cycles of repetition. They wake up to the same thoughts, make the same decisions, engage in the same habits, and wonder why nothing changes. But change requires disruption. It requires intentional pressure, a willingness to place yourself in situations where growth is not optional. The person who stays small does so because they avoid these moments. The person who expands does so because they seek them out. If you want to live differently, you must think differently. If you want to think differently, you must force your mind to stretch. If you want to become more, You must force your identity to grow. Stretching your identity is about proving to yourself that you are capable of more than you assumed. It is about taking action before you feel ready, about saying yes to challenges that intimidate you, about refusing to let the past define your future. Those who achieve greatness do not do so because they were born extraordinary. They do so because they consistently forced themselves into bigger shoes before they knew how to fill them. They threw themselves into situations that required them to grow, to adapt, to elevate their thinking. And in doing so, they became the person who could handle the success they once only dreamed of. This is why small thinking is the most dangerous habit of all. It convinces you that your identity is static, that your intelligence, your talent, your capacity are fixed. But the mind is like a muscle, and if you never challenge it, it remains weak. If you never stretch beyond what you believe you can do, you will never discover what you are actually capable of.